So hello everyone. Welcome to Swift for everyone. So this session is going to be about navigating navigation. So I'm Jiachen, I'm an Apple certified trainer, and Swift for everyone is basically this series of free Swift workshops that we do. So just to start off, if you have any questions as we go about this session, feel free to just ask them within the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat as we go along, and if you spot a question that you know how to answer, you can always just respond in the chat. So introducing Swift for everyone for a bit. So it's basically a series of community-run Swift workshops where every week we try to have a community Swift workshop. So for example, this week is about navigation. Last week it was the same workshop but in person, and then the week before it was an introductory workshop to Swift. So every single week we're trying to have a Swift workshop so that everyone can have an opportunity to join us. So for today, if you would like to access the resources, I highly recommend scanning this QR code or going to swiftforeveryone.com/2. The main purpose there is that I'll be going at a specific speed, which might not cater to exactly what you're at. So if you're installing something, if something takes a bit longer, you might need, some time and you can just follow along with the resources there. Or if you like to speed ahead, you can always just look through the resources and follow along from there. So the resources are all available on Notion. So this is kind of what it looks like. Let me just pull it out for a second. So essentially there's this get started with Xcode bit. If you haven't already installed Xcode, do just download Xcode, set up Xcode with the instructions here. You can download it from the App Store. And then after downloading, you'll be prompted to install the iOS SDK. So just select that one, and then you can create a new project, and then you can get started. So all of the content for today is available on Notion, and that way, if we're going too fast or too slow, you can just copy all of the resources and everything from Notion. Okay, so let's get started. So when we think about navigation, and especially, navigation in Swift and on Apple platforms, there is one really important principle here, and it's that idea of familiarity. And the main purpose of navigation here is really helping to transition the user from one scene to another. And you want that experience to feel familiar regardless of how they use their device. And that's really important because we want our apps to feel harmonious and consistent with the user's experience and how they use their device. Which is why it's always preferred to use the native styles and the native views. So if you're familiar with iOS 26, with the whole liquid glass redesign with tab bars and everything, that's why we emphasize always focusing on implementing the native styles and all of those within your apps. So this is just a quick demo of the app that we're going to be building. Honestly, while writing this piece, I was eating ice cream, so the entire piece is going to be about gelato. But it's basically going to be like a classic, a simple list app where you have a whole bunch of different flavors and you can tap into them to get different information. So for example, I can drill one level deeper to get information about this one, and I can drill one level even deeper to get nutritional information from here. And as you would expect, I can always toggle to a different tab, and different tabs give me different context. So this is like a different feature of my app. And here I have a recommended gelato, and I can also tap to show more information. Notably, nothing here is functional per se. Everything here is more placeholder information, but it's really important for us to get a sense of how navigation works and how to kind of transition a user from different scenes in our app. So this style, you can drag it up so that it takes up the full width, the full height of the screen. And so that's pretty much the entire demo app. So basically, as we go about, for the next hour and a half or so, we're going to create this entire app where we basically try out everything from navigation, where we get to drill deeper and deeper down the hierarchy, to sheets where you have that pop up from the bottom, to different tabs where you can toggle between different content. So for today's agenda, we're just going to start out with a quick welcome to Xcode and Swift. So this is going to be more or less the same piece if you went to our first session as well, where we're just going to get started and showcase a bit of Xcode and create our projects and everything. And then after that, we're going to talk about tabs. So those different tabs that allow you to switch to different contexts. Then after that, we're going to explore navigation stack that allows us to create that hierarchy where we go and dive deeper and deeper down. And then sheets where we can show content on top of other content that pop up. And finally, we'll have a quick piece on what's next. So let's get started with a quick welcome to Xcode. So Xcode is the integrated development environment for creating all of the apps across Apple platforms. And you can kind of think of this as like your file explorer. It shows all of the files available to you, and you can just access all of your different Swift files and everything, your folders and everything within Xcode. And Swift is a programming language that we use. So it is really amazing because it is really designed from the ground up to be really fast, modern, and safe. Which means for you, it is a joy to write. It is really English-like, and as far as possible, it tries its best to make it very simple for anyone to understand. How we like to see it is that it has a really low barrier to entry. Anyone can build a simple app with it, but it has a really high ceiling. You can build really incredible experiences, you can build incredible tools with Swift. So a lot of your favorite apps on iPhone, they're all built with Swift. And of course, as you would expect, Swift supports all of your favorite Apple platforms. So regardless of, iPhone, iPad, Mac, Apple Vision Pro, all of the apps work perfectly across all of them with little to no code changes. So to get started, if you've just opened up Xcode for the first time, you can download the iOS SDK. So if you miss this piece, you can always go to swiftforeveryone.com/tool, and that is where all the resources will be for today. So after you kind of download everything that you need and all of that, this is kind of what you'll see when you open up Xcode. So I'm gonna get started by creating a new project. So I'm gonna create a new project, and I'm gonna name this Gelato. So first of all, I'm gonna select iOS and app, and then I'm naming this Gelato. For the theme, you can select none at this point. The theme is only relevant when you're publishing to the App Store where you have an App Store account. And same with the organization identifier. In this case, for the example, I'm using com.example. It is only relevant if you're really publishing an app to the App Store. So for now, it doesn't really matter. Interface, we'll choose SwiftUI, language Swift, testing system, and storage, we can select none. Afterwards, we can just save this into whatever folder you want. So I'm going to save it into my downloads, but you can save it into your desktop or whatever. The key thing here is that if the folder is managed by iCloud, you might want to reconsider saving it there, because sometimes Xcode might not work super well with that when iCloud is caching certain files and it's having to download those files as it comes in. So I'm just going to save my file over to Xcode, and I'm just going to set this as an iPhone 17 Pro. Okay, so after you create a project, this is kind of what you should see. A simple little editor. My preview is still loading, but that's nothing to worry about. So right now, I'm just gonna give about 90 seconds so that everyone can kind of have some time to get to this stage, whether you're creating a project or whatever you need to do. So here we go. Okay, so that was about 90 seconds. So I hope you've had the chance to kind of get started with some of this. So, you have Xcode loaded up and everything is good. Okay, so this is kind of what we have right now. We have a quick little Xcode project. And this is just some quick tips on navigating Xcode. Because I understand, some of you, this might be your first time touching Xcode. Some of you, if you've tried it before, this should be more or less familiar to you. So if we take a look over here, the thing at the side over here is called our live preview. So it's where we can see all of our code changes, when we write any code, everything will appear right there. To the side of it, that's our editor. So all of our open files, that's how we edit the contents of it. So when we type our code, the code changes will appear in our preview. And right beside that, that's our file navigator. So all of the files and folders that we have in our project, they'll show up over there. So you can explore your files, you can create new files from there, and it's going to be really useful as we navigate our project. So if we take a look at the top of that, that's where we have even more controls. So to start, right at the corner, we have the ability to show and hide our navigator. So if you're on a smaller device or you just don't have enough space, you can hide your navigator and you can have a bit more room for your editor and your preview. Beside it is the stop execution button and the run button. Honestly, I have not actually used the stop execution button much, The key one is really the run button. And sometimes when you rerun it, it'll just prompt you whether you like to stop execution before rerunning it. Finally, the one that kind of matters at the end is the run destination. So if you like to run on a physical device or run it on a different simulator, you can choose a new destination. So simulators are basically virtual iPhone that we can use, virtual Apple devices. So it could be an iPhone, an iPad, or an Apple TV, or any Apple device that you can think of. And you can run your app on those virtual devices, and they show up as nice little windows that you can kind of interact with on your Mac. So let's kind of get started. So we've kind of navigated around Xcode. So let's get started. So with tabs. So tabs allow us to switch between different states and different sections of our app. And most importantly, it allows us to preserve the current navigation state. So you've probably seen a lot of your favorite apps with this. So this is, for example, the clock app. And you notice how we're able to jump between the different tabs in the clock app. So, as you tap the different tabs, tap the different tabs. Okay. You're jumping between different sections and different features of the app. And one amazing way that I use to kind of learn about all of these tools and technologies is actually the human interface guidelines. So the human interface guidelines is this kind of document by Apple that contains a lot of information on how you can design. So let's have a look at it. So this is the human interface guidelines. So this is how it kind of gets started. The easiest way to find all of the resources I want is just by typing in, the thing I have in mind. So if I like to learn more about implementing tabs, I can just search for tab. And under navigation and search, here it is. So tab bars. And you can kind of see, all of the best practices, all of the different ways that you should be using tab bars. So for example, they gave the example of how you should use it to support navigation and not actions, and how you can think about overflowing tabs and all of those kinds of things, and what kind of symbols that you should be using. So this is a really comprehensive document that goes really deep in depth about every single thing about design on Apple platforms. And I highly recommend, if you're thinking about building or designing an app, to just have a look at this. If you have a question about it, if you have a question about design, if you have a question about, how you should be implementing certain things, see if there's an article on the human interface guidelines that can help you with that. It really covers a very, very broad range, and it could have something that's valuable for you. So how tab views in SwiftUI work is something like this. So you have a tab view like this, and within it, you just store different tabs. And that's how you toggle between each individual tab. So we can take a look at this in action in Xcode. So in Xcode over here, I've made no code changes. It's exactly the same as we started. So let's start by creating a tab view. So I'm just going to delete all of the code that we have up until this point, and I'm just going to create a tab view. So at this point, I'd like to highlight something. We use the curly braces over here, and curly braces in Swift denote what's inside what else. And that's a very important pattern because, very quickly and very easily, you're going to start to have a lot of different things with curly braces and everywhere. So making sure that you understand where each of your curly braces are is really important. Right now, I can create my first tab here. And what I'm going to try to do as much as possible is rely on my code completion. So as I type my code, you notice that Xcode is smart enough to go like, hey, here are some tips and here's some stuff that you can use to complete. I would like the one with a system image and some content. So this one right here is perfect. And I can provide a title. So this is just the title of the tab. So I'll call this Explore. And I like to find a system image. So the best way to find an image or an icon in Swift is by using SF symbols. So you can always jump to the Symbol Explorer. And if you like to learn more about Symbol Explorer and images like that, you can always watch week before last's content. To find the Symbol Explorer, all I need to do is I can go to View, and I can choose Show Library. Over there is my entire range of symbols, and I want something that kind of denotes explore. So maybe it's something to do with a compass. So that is a simple example. Safari has that compass. But maybe I want something a bit more explicit, or maybe something a bit more interesting. So maybe something like a signpost. Oh, okay, so I really like this one where, it has a signpost pointing to the right and left. So let's try that out. So I can put the icon there. And whenever you see something with the brackets and the arrow like this, all you need to do is just press return or enter on your keyboard and it'll fill in for you. So with that, I have my first tab. So it's my first tab over here that says Explore, and you can see it appear on my live preview. So it is interactive, but there's only one tab for me to interact with right now. I'm gonna do the same for another tab, and this tab will be my recommended tab. So I'm just gonna choose the same option of system image. And in this case, I want, another icon. So I'm just going back to my library. So I'm using the keyboard shortcut right now, which is Command Shift L. And I can search for something like heart. Perfect. And once again, I can just press return over here. And I have two tabs. So what's great is right now I can swap between the two tabs. And, I can, nothing really is changing right now, but it is showing me different content. I can actually visualize that by putting a text here that says Explorer and over here that says recommended. So when I'm in the Explore tab, it has the word Explore, which corresponds to this text over here. When I'm in the recommended tab, it has the word recommended, which corresponds to this text over here. So now you kind of have an idea of how this can be implemented, of how, you can very simply and easily get started with all of these tabs. So now I'm going to give you some time to kind of get to this stage, I really want you to focus on using the code completion rather than copying the code word for word. So here's another 90 seconds and let's get started. So now that we have two tabs set up, now I'm looking at my phone and what I notice is also this other thing. Certain apps like, for example, the App Store, they have this other tab over here like a search bar. And what I love about it is that it's separate from all of the other tabs. And that's a very new style that literally just came out in September when iOS 26 became public. And I really want to implement that within my app because I want to create, a unified experience where everyone feels familiar. So I can do that within my app with the search tab. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna copy the recommended tab here, and I'm gonna rename this to search. For the icon, I'm gonna choose something else. So I can go back to my library, which is under view and show library. And for a search bar, I think the best option is of course a magnifying glass. So I have a couple of options. I'm just gonna choose the typical magnifying glass over here, and I can just press return to fill it in. So this doesn't quite look like a search bar yet. I'm just gonna change the text here first. It doesn't quite look like the search tab that I saw earlier, but we're almost there. So what I kind of want is something like this, where that search bar is separated from everything. But right now, it's kind of combined together with it. All I need to do to separate it out is by providing the role of search. Once I put that role, you notice that it has actually separated itself from the rest of the content. So this is really important because as a developer, now I'm able to very easily adopt native styles. So this makes sure that my app feels familiar for the user across all of the other apps that they use. So whether they're toggling between something like the App Store or my app or their favorite messaging app or anything, we all adopt the same styles so that it provides a harmonious experience for the user. So this brings me to the next part. Just now, what I showed you was basically just putting placeholder views in those tabs. But what we want to do when we think of a bigger picture and a proper app is trying to make sure that we create small and reusable components that we can kind of separate out. And that's where refactoring views come in. So refactoring views allow us to organize our code into smaller, more reusable components. So typically you see a lot of different screens. For example, the Explore tab can be one view, the recommended tab can be another view, and the search tab can be another view. And this really helps to make code a lot more readable and a lot more reusable. So in order to create a new file, we can get started by going to File, New, and File from Template. And then after that, select SwiftUI view. It's important to select the SwiftUI view because SwiftUI view provides you with some sample code for you to get started. If you choose Swift file, you can just delete the file and you can restart with SwiftUI view. So let me just show you how we can get started. So I can just come up to the menu bar here and I can select File, New, and I can choose File from Template. Over here, I can make sure to select SwiftUI View and I can press Next. So I can store it within my app, and in this case, I'm just going to call it Explore View. With this Explore View, what I can do now is if I jump back to Content View, so you notice that Explore View just says the word Hello World, which is perfectly fine for me. I can come back to Content View, and if I swap out the Explore View text here with the Explore text here with the Explore View itself, now you notice that now in the preview it says Hello World, and Hello World is actually derived from the Explore View's content. So we can hold down the Command key, and if I click on any of these symbols over here, I can jump into what it means, or its definition. So over here, when I command click on Explore View, I can see where it's declared over here, where it basically says create a view that says Hello World. So now I want you to kind of do this for yourself. So create 3 separate tabs, one for Explore, one for Recommended, and one for the search bar. And create a different file for each of these tabs. So, Explore View, Recommended View, and Search View. So this can be a really good chance for you to practice and just put all of this together, and then we'll continue from there. So I hope you've had some chance to kind of create all of your view files. If you kind of got lost along the way, don't worry, I'm gonna show you right now. So sorry about that. Okay, so jumping back here, I can create my new view files by once again coming up to File, New, and File from Template, and then I can choose SwiftUI View once again. And in this case, because I'm creating my second one for my Recommended tab, I can call this Recommended View. After that, I can, just bring it over into my content view, and I can just call it in here. Finally, I'll do one for the search view. And I can just pass it in over here. So I like to see the content views role right now. It's kind of like, like a traffic controller, where it's kind of directing what the user sees to the different views. So it's kind of like pointing like, hey, if you're in the Explore tab, you should go to the Explore view over here. If you're in the Recommended tab, you should jump over to the Recommended view. And if you're in the Search tab, you should jump over to the Search view over here. So it helps us toggle between all of these different views. And just to illustrate this a bit clearer, I can just command click on Explore to jump straight into the Explore view, and I'll just change this word to Explore. Back in Content View, I can change the word from Recommended to Recommended. And back in Search, I can jump back and I can just change this word to Search. So if we take a look at our live preview now, as we jump between these different tabs, they kind of show different information because they're displaying the different views within it. I like to call out one other thing right now. Notice when I open up the Explore View file, the preview actually only shows my Explore View. So it does not show all of the infrastructure of the tab and everything, because it is literally only previewing this text over here that says Explore. The trick around that, if I like to see the tab and all of that fun stuff, is by pinning the preview. So I can go over to Content View. I can click Pin over here at the top. And this basically means as I navigate around my app, as I jump between the different views, the Content View preview will stay put here. And if I like, I can jump over to the Explore View preview by clicking over here. But it keeps my Content View preview always accessible for me. Okay, So that's basically an introduction on tabs. We've been able to create tabs, we've been able to toggle between tabs, and we've been able to create a search tab that exists on its own and separated from everything. Now let's talk about navigation stack. Navigation stack is one of my favorite ways of navigating an app because it is the simplest way, and it's probably something that you've seen a lot, whether you know its name or not. So navigation stack, really, the purpose is just navigating through a hierarchy of views. And what really is great is that it helps you maintain a history of views. So, that consistent back button that you always have in the top corner, that is part of the navigation stack. So if you take a look at some of your favorite apps, so this is the settings app. And if you open up different settings, as you go and dive deeper and deeper through the menus, notice how you can always have that back button in the top corner, and you can always jump one level up and up and up at a time. As always, if you're interested in any of this kind of thing, there's always the human interface guidelines to learn more about this. So if you're interested, here. So right now I'm on the tab bars page. There isn't something called navigation stack per se in here, but what I can always search for is this thing called a toolbar. So toolbars help discuss, how a navigation stack works, including the navigation title and all of that. So, toolbars are basically, how navigation works in Swift. So all of the information that you need about it, like how you should arrange your content there. And one of the amazing things about it is also the fact that you can have toolbar icons and toolbar buttons that you can use to jump to different actions. Okay, so let's take a look at navigation stacks here. So the important part about navigation stacks in our apps is just how, they function. So you have, let's say, your root view. So that's where you're starting out. And then you can have different child views from there. So you can kind of branch off and go deeper and deeper down the stack. And as a user, you can start out in, for example, the first tab, the first view. And if you tap on a navigation link, you can go one level deeper and deeper down the hierarchy. So it really works like a hierarchy that you're going deeper and deeper down to access more and more information. So let's take a look at how it works. So right now I'm in my Explore view, and I'm just going to create a navigation title. So it's one of those big headlines and those big styles that you have seen in all of your favorite apps, like the App Store, Messages, and a lot of other apps there. So I can create a navigation stack. And right now, nothing has changed. I don't see anything. And in this case, let me just add a placeholder here again that says Explore. And within the navigation stack, on any view that's within it, you can add this modifier called navigation title. So if you remember from the first session, or if you didn't attend the first session, no worries. When we put a dot preceding anything here, it usually refers to adding a modifier. So modifier allows us to modify the behavior or appearance of something. So in this case, I'm adding a navigation title. So the navigation title, I can just call it Explore. And Explore. And immediately you see this nice title, this nice consistent title style that we see across the system. What's great about navigation title is that regardless of what view I place it on, for example, I could place it on a VStack here, and it would still work perfectly fine. So right now, I want to give you the opportunity to kind of explore this on your own. So on the recommended tab, so in the separate view, I want you to create a navigation stack with the word recommended. You can also feel free to customize some of the content. If you want to add an emoji, go ahead. Have some fun with this. Okay, so that's 5 minutes. So let me just show you how it's done. Okay. So back to Xcode over here. Now that we have our Explore tab set up, let's set it up for our recommended tab as well. So if we jump over to our recommended view over here, we can create our navigation stack. So the navigation stack wraps around all of the contents here. And we can just add a navigation title here that says recommended. We can also embed this all in the VStack so that it's nice and neat. So I'm using Control I, which is reindent. So it automatically reindents your code. Even if, it's a bit messy and everything, it will just help you reindent it so it's nice and neat. Because in Swift and SwiftUI, the hierarchy and, the way that we nest everything really matters. For example, this curly brace indicates that this text exists within the V stack. And this curly brace recommends uh indicates that the V stack and all of the associated stuff, they all are within the navigation stack over here. So keeping our curly braces and everything really nice and neat is really helpful for us. So that's navigation stack. The next step here is our navigation link. Now that we've kind of created nice titles and all, now we really want to help users dive one level deeper. So navigation links allow us to basically create that tappable hierarchy where you can kind of drill down, for example, in this case, one level deeper. So let's take a look at how it's done. So right now I'm in my recommended view, but I'm just going to jump back to my explore view over here. So I just have the text that says explore, but not to worry, I can, start to edit this. So I can create some navigation links. So navigation link, and I'll use my code completion here. So I like to use the one that has the title and, a destination. So when we think about a navigation link, it's basically, providing two pieces of information. It's how it should look like, because navigation link basically functions as, like a fancy button that brings you to a magical place. So how it looks like and where it should go. So the title and destination is basically just how it looks like. For example, a title, so it's a piece of text, and the destination, so what view should it show? So let's try that. So because this is a gelato app, I'll maybe call this some gelato flavors. So let's call it after 8. And in this destination, I'll leave it empty for now, but let's take a look at how it works. So if I tap on this, now you realize it kind of brings us one level deeper. And it gives us that nice little back button that we're familiar with. So I'm just gonna duplicate this and replicate this for all of the other ones that we have. So maybe strawberry and Earl Grey lavender. And maybe one more. You know what? Acai sorbet. Perfect. So now we have 4 different links that kind of lead us into deeper and deeper down that hierarchy. Okay. So at this point, I'm just gonna give you about 90 seconds to kind of implement this, and then we can move on from there. Okay, so that's been 90 seconds. So I hope you've had the chance to kind of implement this and create those navigation stacks to get started. So these navigation stacks will kind of help us figure out all of the different views that we want to show. So I have a problem right now. So if you kind of take a look at this, if you take a look at how it works now, I don't like how plain and boring this looks. It's basically like a list of different buttons, and it feels very off. It doesn't feel very native. It doesn't feel like, it should belong. And there's a really simple way for us to solve that problem, and that is with forms. So forms allow us to provide a structured way for us to display these different controls and different information. And it is really easy for us to implement it. So right now, this is how it looks like. For example, the settings app, it's one example of how forms can be used. It has different sections over here, and all of your information is displayed in this consistent style. You would have noticed a lot of other apps on your phone also kind of adopt the same style across all of them. And that's all through forms. So we can implement it over here by literally just changing our VStack into a form. What form also provides for us is that it provides this scrolling mechanism, so we can scroll up and down, and you can you notice how there's also that progressive blur as you scroll things off screen, and your explore title immediately goes in line. So this is great because it also redesigns how our navigation links look like. So it's basically this title with this nice disclosure indicator that indicates that you can tap in and you can find more information. So if I tap in, we go one level deeper. So that's forms, and that's forms in SwiftUI. So right now, we've gone one level deeper. We've been able to navigate and we've had a nice way for us to navigate that deep. But now, what's happening is that when we tap one level deeper, it's an empty view. And that's where we want to create a detailed view. Essentially, what happens after we tap one level deeper. To start, I could probably just put a text over here that says hello. And if we tap on after 8, we see the text over here. But that's not exactly what I want. I like this to going back to what we mentioned earlier about, creating things that are modular and creating custom views for everything. I want to create a custom view so that this file doesn't get too big because, we don't want like a 1,000-line file where everything is hard to find and unreadable. So I can come up here once again and I can choose new and I can choose file from template and I can create a new SwiftUI view. In this case, I'm just going to name the view after 8 view, just so that I can create a view just for the after 8 section over there. Once again, I'm just going to grab the view's name and I'm just going to put it in the explore view and pass it over here. So what you notice is that once I do that, if I tap on after 8 view, it shows it. If I tap on after 8, it shows the after 8 view correspondingly. If I tap on strawberry, it shows nothing because there's no view supplied over here. So this is a great start for us because we have a nice little interface here. And in our after 8 view, we can also start to format some of this. So notably, if you look at the after 8 views live preview here for the view itself, you would notice that you don't actually have all of the infrastructure and all of the other stuff that you would see with the content view. We don't see the back button, we don't see all of the other stuff that comes with it, like the tabs and everything. So the best way to preview this is by pinning the content view over here so that you can have the best idea of what the interface looks like. So in our after 8 view here, I'm just gonna maybe add some placeholder information. So maybe I'll just add a form here so that it's also nicely formatted. So when we tap in here, it's nice and nice. Yeah. And we can add a navigation title here as well, so that as you drill deeper and deeper, you have another navigation title to go to. So let's call this after 8, because that's the gelato flavor. And if we tap here, the navigation title shows up. So maybe I'll just set some placeholders. So maybe gelato description goes here. And if we tap into it, there's our description over there. So this is just a very simple example of how we can create detailed views and go deeper and deeper down that hierarchy. Now, I want to go one level deeper because I just showed you how we can traverse, about one level deep within the hierarchy. Now we can traverse one level even deeper and with the same concepts with that same navigation link. So I want you to kind of try this out on your own now. I want you to try to create one level deeper by using a navigation link called nutritional information, and you can put some placeholder content over there. So that navigation link, once again, lives within our form. And when you tap on it, it should go one level deeper down that hierarchy to present even more information. So here's another 5 minutes, and all the best. Okay, so I hope you've kind of had a chance to implement that navigation link and all of those information. And if you got lost at any point, don't worry. You can always access the Notion with all of the information, or you can always just take a look here, because I'm just gonna implement it right now. So right now, in After 8 view, I'm gonna implement that navigation link. So just like before, I can create a navigation link, and I'm gonna use the code completion here as well. So I'm using the one of the title and destination. And for this title, I'm just gonna call it nutritional information. And I'm just gonna put some placeholder data in the destination. So maybe just it's very healthy. Because gelato is healthy, I assume. So if I tap on after 8, and now I have this other option for nutritional information, and that allows me to go one level deeper in that hierarchy. So right now, I'm kind of over here in that hierarchy. In the second stage, if I tap on after 8, I go on to the third stage where I get even deeper down that hierarchy. So right now, if I click here, I'm one level deeper down the hierarchy. So this is great. So I basically am able to traverse the hierarchy and I'm able to always go back up. So if I press back, I jump back up one level. And if I press back again, I'm all the way back to the start. And this can go infinitely deep. You've seen other apps like settings app where you have really deeply nested things that go really, really deep. And it really helps you, organize all of this information in a way that the user can very easily access, in a way that's familiar to them. So that's navigation stack. A super simple way for you to kind of express all of this information and let users traverse a huge hierarchy. Now let's talk about Sheets. So Sheets is one of my favorite ways to present content because it allows you to present content over the user's current context. So this is an example of a sheet. So, when you tap the button, you probably have seen this kind of layout where, you have something that pops up from the bottom and kind of takes up part of your screen. So this basically takes the user away from their current context and allows you to present other information. And one of the amazing things about Sheets is that you have the flexibility as well. So for example, this sheet takes up about half the content, so it still lets the content in the background shine through. So if you want to add additional context to information, Sheet is the perfect way to do that. So we can kind of get started here by more or less, defining that interface. So I want to just create this interface over here that we have in mind. So with that recommended and that image and everything. So let's get started here. First, I'm more or less done with the explore view, so I'm just going to jump over to my recommended view over here. So my recommended view right now is basically just this, it's the recommended title and the text that says recommended. So to start, I can import an image. So thankfully, I've prepared an image for myself. So over here in Notion, I've also attached an image if you like to use it. So it's just a photo of gelato, which I have in my downloads right here. So it's just a nice little photo of gelato that I took. So what we can do is we can import it into Xcode. The first thing is we'll go to our assets file. All you need to do, if you want to import any image, it can be a PNG, a JPEG, a HEIC, it can be, I believe it also supports GIFs and PDFs and all of that. All you need to do is just drag it and drop it. And then after that, you can come up here and you can press return or enter on your keyboard with it selected, and you can rename it to anything. So I'm just going to capitalize this so it's nice and consistent with everything else, but that's about it. So this allows you to very easily import any assets that you have. So if you have images, if you have anything, you can just import it straight through to here. So now I'm going to give you about 90 seconds once again to implement this. Just some time to, download whatever you need. If you want to take a photo of yourself, go ahead, take a photo of whatever is in front of you, because you don't have to build an app about gelato per se. Or if you want to just grab it from the Notion, you can go ahead too. So here's 90 seconds and see you in 90 seconds. Okay, so that's been about 90 seconds. So I hope you've had the opportunity to kind of implement this and, get things started here. So now, back in our app here, let's kind of get started with that. So since we have our image imported, we can start, laying out our views. So within our explore view, within our, recommended view, let's lay everything out. So this is what we kind of want it to look like. We want the image, and then we want, a show info button. So the first thing I'm going to lay out is the image. So in order to lay out our image here, I'm going to create an image view here. And I like to use the code completion for this piece especially, where you start with the open brackets and you just type a dot, and then you start spelling it out. So, when I type dot gelato, the code completion immediately offers, hey, do you want to use this resource here? And this is an amazing way for me to make sure that I don't make any typos or I don't make any mistakes. Because if an image is not found, then nothing will show up. So if I take a look at the recommended view, there it is, my gelato. It's kind of close to what I want, not quite. The gelato is a bit big right now, and it's slightly terrifying. So what I can do is I can use some of the modifiers. So remember, modifiers allow us to change the behavior or appearance. So I'm going to use this modifier here called resizable. So resizable effectively says, I'm giving you permission to resize yourself. So I'm telling the image, hey, you can resize yourself. Okay, this looks great, but it looks slightly distorted. I do not believe my fingers are that long and, squished. So that's because we basically said this image can resize, but we didn't tell it how it can resize. So it just went, okay, I'll resize in whatever way makes me fit within the frame. So this gives us two options. There's the first one called scale to fit. So scale to fit basically says you scale yourself such that you fit within the view's frame. So it's, nice and neat. Or the other one is scale to fill. So scale to fill allows us to say, hey, let's take up as much space as we can. I know the difference isn't as clear in this example, but scale to fill can kind of be seen as, like, for example, your wallpapers, where you really want it to take up all of the space that you can, so that, it goes from edge to edge and, there's no, white things at the corner. So I'm just going to use scale to fit for my purpose over here. And you can see it's slightly smaller than scale to fill. Okay, so right now, I want my gelato image to kind of be right at the top, so I'm just going to put a spacer. If you remember from last week, or even if you didn't come, no worries. What spacer essentially does is it functions as a spring, so it pushes all of the content to the top. So in this case, the image of the gelato, it's being pushed all the way to the top, so that we can put something like the more show info button at the bottom. So I'm going to create a button here that says show info. Okay, so in the button's action, I'm not going to put anything yet. So a button, like a navigation stack, has two things. It needs a label, so how it looks like. So that, that could be, in this case, it's just a piece of text, but it could also be something more complex, like a SwiftUI view or something else. And it needs an action. So what's going to happen when you tap on the button? So it's going to be this defined by this curly brace over here. So right now, if we tap on this button, absolutely nothing happens because there's nothing within those curly braces. So I'm just going to pause over here so that you guys have some time to kind of get to this point. Okay, so that's been about 90 seconds. So let's move on. So now we've pretty much set up our interface. We have all of the pieces that we need. So now we're going to talk about sheets. Now, what we want to do is when the show info button is tapped, we want to present a sheet. And how sheets work is that they present themselves over the current context. So this is really useful if you want to provide the user with additional information over what's going on right now, or you just want to cover everything to show new information. So a common example is, for example, in the Mail app, where a sheet shows up as your compose window because you want to take them to a different context, and while still making it accessible for them to dismiss it and move on. So how sheets work is that you need two things. First, a condition to present the sheet. So, a way for you to say, okay, let's present this sheet and let's hide this sheet. And then the second is the sheet's contents. So, what is going to show up in that view? It's similar to our navigation stack, our navigation link, where we need, how the thing will look like and the contents of the navigation link. So let's take a look at our code here. So the first thing we can do is we can define that condition. So we can create something called a state variable. And a state variable essentially allows us to control whether or not it's presented. So let's say is more info sheet presented equals to false. So right now I'm saying false because I want it to start off not being presented. And I can add a sheet here. By convention, we like to add the sheet right at the bottom. So right at the last curly brace over here, at the bottom of the view, we can just add the sheet here. And we can use the one that says is presented with the content. And for this one, I'm just going to pass it in. So the $ basically says, I'm granting this sheet edit access to my is presented variable. And we can pass in the content here. Finally, in our button over here, we can say is more info sheet presented equals to true. So what happens here is when we're over in the recommended tab, if we tap on show info, the sheet immediately shows up. And just to kind of illustrate that link between this this state variable and the sheet over here, how it works is, for example, if I start out this variable of true, so as long as the variable is true, the sheet will be presented. So if I start out this variable of true, the sheet will immediately be launched and it'll take over the user's screen. And basically, as long as the variable is true, the sheet will be launched. If it's false, the sheet will be closed. So when the user drags down the sheet with the default dismiss gesture by just swiping down, the variable is set back to false. So over here, false, then true, and then now it's back to false. So now I'm able to just quickly set some stuff up here. So I'm just going to create some content within the sheet. So I'm going to File, New, and File from Template. And in this case, I'm just going to call this More Info View. So once again, I'm just going to pass More Info View back into the sheet here, so as to keep things nice and organized. And what happens here is, when I tap on the sheet now, it says Hello World, because that is the contents of More Info View over here. I'm just gonna, fill in some placeholder content here just to make it look nice and like a real app. So maybe I'll just put a navigation stack because I really want those nice, consistent, large titles like the ones that we see here. And maybe I'll give it a title, like a navigation title that says Salted Caramel. And what you notice is that I started a new navigation stack. Navigation stack is used once per hierarchy. So for example, the Explore tab is one hierarchy in and of itself. The recommended tab is another hierarchy in and of itself. But when I show a sheet on top of it, that's another hierarchy that we're going down. But there is nothing that says that you have to always go down a hierarchy if you were to use a navigation stack. There are a lot of different ways for you to present information. And in this case, I'm just using a navigation stack so that I have that nice large titles. Okay, so within here, I can maybe put in some placeholder information. So for example, I could just give some descriptions like salted caramel gelato. That tastes really nice. Okay. Yes. And when I type over here, that's what shows up in the sheet. One of the things that you'll see in the human interface guidelines when you look up sheets is actually the fact that the sheet is great in and of itself. It has the dismiss gesture and everything. But one thing that we try to always advocate for is always having an X button somewhere. So if you read the human interface guidelines, which we will just jump right to, right now we're on toolbars, but if you search up for something like sheet, basically you can get all of the information you want about designing with sheets in mind. And one of the things that they call out is, always providing a way to dismiss. So let me just find that. Okay, yeah. And what you notice is in a lot of Apple's demos, you see the X button over here, so that people always have that option to dismiss, so that if they're unfamiliar with the app or tool, they know how they can always dismiss that sheet. So let's create that X button over here. And we can create it with one of the best and easiest ways to create something that's nice and consistent in the top corner. And that's with the toolbar. So I can use .toolbar, which is a modifier that allows me to add buttons to the toolbar. And I can create a button here. And now I'm going to use a different style. So earlier on, you saw me use the one with just a text. Now I'm using one with a label. And this is a custom label. So I'm just going to supply it with an image of maybe just an X mark. So it's just going to be image, system name, and let's find an X mark. So it's just going to be a cross. I think it might be faster for me to just type it. There we go. Right now, what we have is when we tap show info, now we have this nice X. What I love about this X is that it's consistent with all of the styles, because literally with just this little code, we have a button that, fits nicely with the whole liquid glass theme and everything. We're almost there. This button doesn't function yet, but that's because, we haven't implemented the logic for it to work. We can add the dismiss logic here. So in order to dismiss a sheet, we can either pass in the variable that we used originally to present the sheet, or we can use the environment. So we can use this environment object here called dismiss. And in our button, we can just call the dismiss function. And just like this, when I tap on the X, it dismisses nicely. So this is just a really simple example of how you can really create really complex sheets like that. You can display more and more content with sheets, and you can kind of take the user out of their current context. So it could be, for example, in the to-do list app, where you introduce a sheet so that they can create a new to-do, or when you're jumping between something like the mail app, where for example, drafts and stuff, they show up as sheets because, you can present it in a new context. Or for example, in the Maps app, where sheet is constantly persistent at the bottom, where, all of the search results and all of the information show up within that sheet. So sheets are incredibly flexible and powerful tools that you can use to create your app's experience. So now I'm just going to give you about 90 seconds once again to kind of, follow along, and, if you're stuck at any part, feel free to just ask any questions that you might have. So here we go. Okay, so that was about 90 seconds or so. So let's kind of jump back here. So I want to just highlight what we just did, okay? So we basically created a way for us to dismiss the sheet, and we created a way for us to present that sheet. So back in recommended view, we have this state variable over here that says, is more info sheet presented? And then after that, we're able to present that sheet that opens up the more info view over here. When we want to present the sheet at any point, we just said, is more info presented to true? So in this case, that's in the actions, but in the buttons action. And when that way, when the button is tapped, the sheet will show up. So this really allows us to create very flexible applications like this, where you tap on this and then the sheet appears. Now, what I think would be valuable here is that kind of keeping this view a bit smaller. I like to kind of see the background as we go through this. And I like, for the background image of this gelato to kind of shine through so that we provide that context to the user. And that can be achieved with detents. So presentation detents, let me just jump over there. So presentation detents. So presentation detents, the word actually comes, more from physics, where, it's, that clicking sound that you get, or that clicking sensation you get when you, for example, turn a knob or something. And they allow you to kind of define different sizes for a sheet. So think of it like your sheet is clicking into place into like different places as you drag it up. So, this gives the user flexibility over how much of the content they want to see, and how much of the content, the background content they want to take over with that space. So let's take a look at how we can implement that. So to implement presentation detents, all we need to do is we can come down here and we can type .presentation detents. And we can provide it with a collection of detents. So I'll start with a square bracket, and we can use dots to kind of code autocomplete. So I'll use medium as a start. So when I click on recommended and I tap on show info, it shows up only halfway through. I can also provide other presentation detents like large. So large is the one that takes up the full screen. So by default, it's always set at large. But what you notice now that I have both medium and large, is that now we have this little grabber over here that we can use to grab it, and we can make it larger and smaller. We can also add custom detent styles. So for example, I can have one that's just fractional, so maybe 0.2. And we can have just this nice compact little one. And then if they want more information, they can drag it up, and they can drag it even higher. What you also notice about sheets at this point is that it really adopts that whole liquid glass style. When it's smaller, it it shows with the liquid glass effect of the blur in the background and that nice specular highlights around the edges. But as it gets larger and larger, you lose that liquid glass style such that it takes over the entire interface. So that's presentation intents. It's a really simple way for you to create these little interactions and for you to help the content shine through no matter what you're building. So that is about it for the entire app. We've created a very simple little app that allows us to navigate in a lot of different ways. We have the different tab bars that we can use to jump between different tabs from, the explore, the recommended, and the search tab. And within, each of these tabs, we can go in through a navigation stack. So we can dive deeper and deeper down the hierarchy here. And we can use the back button to navigate back out. We've also explored sheets that allow us to present content on top of here. So, we can just drag up a sheet and it snaps nicely into place. And we can use the dismiss action such that we can press the X button to automatically close it. So that's navigation in SwiftUI. So we've kind of explored a lot of really powerful tools with navigation in SwiftUI. And one of the things I really love about all of this is how easy it is to implement it. Navigation is really designed to be very simple and very consistent across all of the platforms that you use. So let's talk about what's next from here. So of course, we have a whole bunch of other workshops coming up. So this video over here, the recording of this session is going to be uploaded to YouTube by next week, whenever I have the time to. And you can start to rewatch the session, like the Get Started with SwiftUI session, from I believe 2 weeks back. And if you're interested, you can rewatch that, and we really talk about the views and modifiers and how you can kind of create really custom layouts from there. Week after next, we're conducting working with controls in person, and then the week after that, we're conducting that online. And then it's going to go on and on. So build an AR experience, where we're gonna get hands-on and we're gonna explore how we can create AR experiences with UIKit. And if you're interested in developing for Apple Vision Pro, for instance, UIKit is the same foundations that power Apple Vision Pro. And like I mentioned in the beginning, all of the code works across iPhone, iPad, Mac, and even Apple Vision Pro and Apple TV. So it works across all of the Apple platforms. So there's very little code changes that you have to do to port an app there. And then we're gonna end off the year with just a piece on maps and location, where we explore how we can integrate Apple Maps into our apps with location, with information about different places, with the if you've seen the enhanced city views and all of those, it's really amazing and some really incredible stuff that you can do from there. And all of this is completely free. So even the tools, even the technologies we work with, and the workshops, all of this is completely free for you to access. So another thing I like to call out is if you happen to be in Singapore, you can join us on October 28th for iOS Dev Scouts meetup. So Swift for Everyone is part of iOS Dev Scout, and it's part of the greater iOS developer community in Singapore. So we're just running this whole series of community workshops for everyone. And right before the October 28th event, there is a Meet with Apple session where you can explore some of the latest tools and technologies that were announced. So it's at the same place, and you can just join both of them. iOS Conf SG, which is run by the iOS community, is also happening as well. So it's from 21st to 23rd January next year, and it's happening in person in Singapore as well. So if you happen to be in Singapore, do join us. And of course, additional resources are always available on Notion, swiftforeveryone.com/tool. So I'm just gonna show you some of the upcoming stuff on Notion. So all of the upcoming workshops are available here. So you can click on the Luma links and you can just join, whether in person or online. And all the other events, so these are, various other events from, other folks. So the Meet with Apple session on enhancing your apps with the latest tools and technologies, that's available here. And if you happen to be from another Southeast Asian city, you can always join along because all of these sessions, they happen in various different cities. So you can just take a look at Meet with Apple, and you might find your city over there. So you can just browse the full schedule. So for example, next week it's happening in Manila, and after that it's going in to, I believe Singapore, Bangkok, and a couple of other cities. So iOS Dev Scout October meetup will happen after the Singapore event. So this is from 1:30 to 5:30 p.m. And then right after that, at 6:30 p.m., we start the iOS Dev Scout meetup. So this is going to be like a less formal meetup, where you get to hear from different people in the iOS developer community, you get to mingle, you get some food, and you get some great technical talks from some amazing people. And of course, we end off every meetup with a Kahoot quiz where there's some prizes. And last but not least, iOS Conf SG. So that's happening next year. So if you're interested, you can come from 21st to 23rd of January, and it's going to be an amazing experience. If you like additional resources to take your learning further, here are some more resources that you can look into. So that's about it for today. And thank you so much for joining us. So we'd appreciate it if you just fill out this quick feedback form. So it's just a 1 minute feedback form. And yeah. So thank you so much.